Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Lynn Jarman Johnson, Chief Marketing Officer with Consumers Credit Union, and we're thrilled to have you here for our third webinar. And we're going to focus on tech. We have such a phenomenal panel for you today. I think you're going to be really excited. You've actually been seeing Dan McGraw, and Dan has actually been a moderator. Today, he's on the other side, so he's in the hot seat, and I'll be asking a lot of questions. Little housekeeping for you. All of the microphones are currently off. And in mute form, except for the panel members. And near the end, at about 1:45, we'll ask for questions so that you can ask questions in the chat section, and away we'll go with that. This is being recorded, and we will play this back so you can share with team members at your leisure. So thank you so much again for joining us. I'll tell you what, it's been just a strange set of circumstances, hasn't it, since mid-March, where all of a sudden we had to just immediately learn how to work, many of us remotely, most of us remotely if we weren't essential services. And that has tested us, testing new technology. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Some of you might be worried about, well, my goodness, do I have to invest so much money into this? We're going to focus on that. We're also going to focus on some ideas that can come your way. You're going to go, oh, I just never thought of that. But then also share your learnings too. So it's very exciting. So let's introduce our panelists today. Jennifer Juergens, she's the CEO of One Bold Step. Jen helps us organize and really optimize growing our membership, our customer base, our employee engagement by creating marketing and sales processes to scale. And she brings proven ROI, which is really exciting in marketing, by the investments that you use and then bringing true value to the modern technology that you're using in your offices. We also have Dan McGraw. Dan is a very avid biker. He rode his bike here today. Hi, Dan. Thanks for being with us. He also brings partners together through technology with DPT Solutions. And employees really are engaged much more by utilizing different services, cloud services, and new ways to communicate. Angela Hill, CEO of co-founder of JADEX Strategic Group. Angela brings fascinating background in CIA. Yep, you heard me right. Data analytics and secure cloud management to clients throughout the globe. Very interesting, and she has lots to focus on, especially surrounding data and what you can do with that. And Scott Sylvester is the Chief Operating Officer of Consumers Credit Union. Scott has a hands-on approach. Believe you me, I saw in 3 days, we actually took all of our team and went remote, including the tellers. It was a fascinating experience, and now the quarantine is lifting, and so it's time to get back to work. So you'll hear from Scott and the tech experience. So thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for being with us, and let's start this morning. You know, there was a poll on Facebook that I read about restaurants and who actually went last night to the very first restaurant, because they are starting to open up. And when that happens, all of a sudden the technology comes into play. Did you get a text? Did you see it on social media? Well, stay safe, stay home is lifting, and many companies are putting new policies into place to help us all make sure that we get to work safe and also use the technologies that are there. Let's begin with Jennifer. Jennifer, it's important now more than ever to differentiate ourselves, and how are companies leveraging to reach the audiences that they need to, especially now that everything is lifting, while focusing on brand?
Well, I think one of the things, first, it's great to go first. I just thought I'd throw that out there. I think one of the things that we are seeing is this sort of collective step back for a minute approach of some of our customers. We had a lot of people with big travel budgets and trade shows and conferences and things planned, and those all went away. And instead of sort of panicking, we've had this ability to take a step back, go back to our data, and really look at who is our customer for real. And I know people are against the word pivot right now, but some companies, their customer has changed, their primary product has changed. And so I think really right now, it's a great time to focus on your data and the accuracy of it. And do you know your customer for real or not?
Scott, what are your thoughts about the change that is happening, especially when you look back, you know, just to March, and how much change happened so quickly?
Well, I think the fact that you brought up restaurants is interesting. I think that industry will change now that we've gone through this. You're going to probably see a lot of companies that were successful with their takeout launch online ordering systems where it's not just a menu online, where others will struggle with that. But I think that it will change the industry, and it's similar to what we've gone through, where we didn't have our offices open, but the lobbies were by appointment only. So we learned a lot through that process, and a lot of folks that would set up appointments, we found that we could actually engage with them and solve their problem without them even coming into the office. So those wow experiences with those members, it's going to change the dynamic of our office, and we're probably not going to have as many visits as we're used to.
Angela, you're cloud-based. Now, has that been extremely helpful to the businesses that you help?
It has, and I was going to add that the one way that I would differentiate the brand is by making sure that your cloud solutions are protected. So looking at technology as a way in which you can provide security and protect the data, not only of your intellectual property, but as well as your clients' data. So approach it with a security mindset and making sure that the solutions that you're using do have the right security protocols in place and controls in place that can ensure the protection of all of the data involved.
I bet that, Angela, that's extremely important, especially when you're focusing on remote work and how the expectations have changed with remote work. You currently and in prior had been already remote working, correct?
Yeah, so I worked for the intelligence community, and as you said, I worked for the CIA for over 6 years. And so I've kind of already am very used to working remotely in global operations, but didn't have some of the technology that's available to us today with some of the cloud solutions. And so in relationship to remote work, the expectations I expect from employees are that they really need to take a security mindset when they handle their data. So making sure that, you know, the right protections are in place and controls are in place with accessing your data. Do the right people have the need to know the data that you're handling and giving the right privileges? So that would be one of the expectations that I would make sure that employees understand, that they have a responsibility to protect and guard the data of the organizations that they belong to.
Dan, you had to immediately switch to remote as well, but then you're also consulting companies to try to help them. And now, do you think it's going to be business as usual? Or do you think now that Zoom and WebEx and GoToMeeting are really becoming what will become the norm?
So, you know, I think people are creatures of habit. And I think really simply put, people want easy, whether it's your employees or your customers. And so what I think, you know, I don't know if I've adopted the term the new normal, but what I do believe is that knowing that people want easy, they want easy interactions, is that, you know, some of the tools, it's like the food you've never had before, and you go out with some friends and there's, hey, try this, and you try the food, and now you got to have it every day, right? And so I think that those things that we're finding with technology, that is that natural fit, that maybe a company purchased it, they deployed it, and their people are using it. That is the stuff that I think is going to become the expectation of both the consumer as well as your employees. And I think that companies need to be prepared for that.
And I think that leads right into what is it that we are going to have our customers, our members expect as it revolves to our interaction. Scott, you briefly touched on that a little bit, but it really takes some forethought and planning. And as well as just opening up to say, hey, we just don't know, and we're going to make sure we change to help you. Is that correct?
Oh, for sure. And I think as when COVID first started, the general public, your consumer, your customer, I think there was patience out there. But as it went on, patience probably wear thin, and they want to be back to normal where things are easy and lines are not expected. So I think we'll have to figure out ways to, especially as we go back to work, are there ways that we can communicate to them digitally in a way that they can get the transactions they want to get done or the product that they want to get to as quick as possible. I think there are large companies that absolutely failed during this opportunity to go to online. I've had just terrible experiences with some big box retailers that they can't even answer a phone. So they clearly had infrastructure set up that their call centers were traditional call centers and had no way, shape, or form to move those folks to online, but yet they have these huge facilities in our malls all around the country. So I think it's going to be a challenge for a lot of companies to come out of this on the positive side. But if you're nimble, I think you can do it and be very successful moving forward.
And Jennifer, how do you think that impacts a company's brand long term? And how can you start to foresee, maybe I can start making changes currently that I hadn't even thought about? Is it too late?
Well, I think we were already seeing this evolution of the buyer and marketing before this hit us. People were moving online. They were looking online for information before they made any purchase decisions. And the companies who are already there are recognizing, or perhaps breathing a quick sigh of relief to say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I moved all of my content over here. And then the rest are madly scrambling to catch up. I mean, that being said, these big events, and I keep going back to, we serve a lot of B2B clients, and the face-to-face meeting, the big trade show, the big conference, it's just not possible anymore. Yet customers need to understand your business. So what we're seeing is marketing's role in educating potential customers is growing and growing and growing. And we have to use more online, medias to reach these people. So the virtual event, the webinar like we're doing today, our customers who focus on educating their customers are doing much better than those who are still trying to sell directly right now.
And Dan, do you think that mentality of a digital transformation is going to be something that is more relevant? You do hear though that people are just saying, oh, I just really want that face-to-face. I need that. And yet the digital is here. How relevant is it?
Yeah, right. So you think about the Industrial Revolution, right? And in manufacturing, really automating the assembly line and the processes. And you talk about Industry 4.0, digital transformation, that really is process automation. And what I always encourage folks to do is and I'm only going to use this since Jennifer already mentioned it, is pivot. Which brings me back to the Friends episode, but anyway, we will not go down that path. But anyway, it is really your ability, and Scott used the word nimble. It really, process automation and digital transformation gives you that ability as a business to be able to pivot, to be nimble, and really truly be able to position your business and always remain at really the leading edge. And frankly, by leveraging technology to automate, it also helps you differentiate from your competition. And so, those folks that were prepared, and let's face it, right, a pandemic doesn't happen every 5 or 10 years. So I wouldn't say that the reason to go down that path is due to a pandemic, but you never know. It could be natural disasters, could be anything. But the companies that had the technology and the process automation were the ones that were able to pivot and continue business as usual, so to speak, versus the ones that went, oh my gosh, what do we do? And just started basically buying every piece of technology they could in hopes that it would get them further down the way.
We're going to talk about budget in just a few minutes. Jennifer, I'd like you to recap a little bit about that process automation. I think some people are a little leery because maybe they don't have the data analysts on staff, or perhaps they feel like this is going to, some employees, this is going to replace my job when you hear automation, digital transformation. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think, Lynn, about marketing and technology colliding right now, marketing is very much a digital exercise right now, and there's a collision there. The other thing you need to think about is that sales and marketing, that's both a process. We're going through a process of getting to know you, a process of convincing you or talking to you, and process, right? When it can be measured, it can be managed, thank you, Peter Drucker, and it can be improved. So these technology solutions that we put into place that capture all of this data that doesn't seem to be important nor related suddenly becomes really interesting, right? We're going from somebody who didn't know us to somebody who purchased, and we've got this data path now to help us understand what was successful and why, so that we can go back and replicate it. If you don't have systems in place, you will spend so much time trying to analyze that data that by the time you figure it out, the trend will change. So it's just really important, right, that this foundation is set, and that you use what's available to you, because I guarantee you your competitors are going to do it.
Yeah, if you look back, a technology roadmap, this digital process that we're talking about for consumers started years ago. Where was it that you and your team really started to think, hey, we need, and maybe you didn't call it a technology roadmap, but it truly has served us well. Do you remember back thinking innovatively, boy, we really need to all be able to work remote? How did that go?
Well, we really have been doing strategic planning for 25 plus years here at Consumers, and then as the company grew and technology became such an important part of that, we would create a technology strategic plan as well, and things would bubble up that had strategic emphasis would bubble up to the corporate strategic plan. So that was very important. But on the processes, it's the way we talk about it. So we're a fast growing company. So when you're fast growing, you have a lot more customers and a lot more transactions. Those processes multiply too. And so resources to do those have to be added. So we talked more about how do we eliminate the processes, and talked about it not in people, but in compensation dollars. So can we take compensation dollars and not throw them at processes, but throw them at revenue generation? And so revenue generation doesn't necessarily say people either, but revenue generation is through data gathering, marketing, and your salespeople. So let's try to redirect that compensation dollar to other departments. You get in the back of the office with all these people, they want to build these empires of departments, right? And we see more success by staying lean as we grow there and grow the company more on the customer side.
It sounds, and I know it is, very non-silo, very focused on collaboration. Angela, how have you found that type of a roadmap when you're talking to your customers and client base?
Well, similar to what Scott mentioned, we actually recommend that businesses start with business continuity planning and planning for disasters, and really just understanding like their critical infrastructure, what critical assets they have, what type of data do they hold, and then understanding like, do you have any regulatory needs that you need to invest in with technology? So are the systems that you're actually deploying throughout the organization going to allow you to be compliant and to meet your regulatory needs, or are those systems able to even protect the type of data that you're bringing into the business? Those are some of the things that we help businesses do as far as organizing and building that technology roadmap.
Well, now let's take a look into that roadmap a little bit and the considerations and pitfalls that you might encounter as you're either building or you're utilizing the roadmap itself. I liken it to what we're really focusing at Consumers right now is a data lake, and how are we making sure that data is smart and clear and helps the overall customer experience. Jennifer, how important is that? You mentioned earlier, and I found it very interesting to say, you can have all the data in the world, but sometimes if all you're doing is mushing it together, it's not helping you with what your strategies are.
Yeah, and I always go back to the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. And it's especially true with data. There's interesting data, Lynn, and then there's actionable data. And I think when we start to put these things together, we have to make sure that we're focusing on the latter. Just as a side note, this made me think of a current project we did with a client who said, we don't need to do any work at the top of the funnel at the awareness side of marketing. We have this great database of 45,000, perfect prospects. After a simple cleansing exercise, some never bounce, removal of info ats and ad AOLs and some of the non-business emails that they were focused on, out of 45,000, we actually had 6,500 valid contacts. So it's something to really look at, because you also have to recognize they were paying to have all of that useless contact information inside of a database, and they were marketing to it as well.
And really that is the focus, right? And how are you marketing to the right people? Angela, how have you found that when you look at smart data, especially if it's all in the cloud, you mentioned compliance and risk assessment, very critical, correct?
It is, but I wanted to actually piggyback on what Jennifer is talking about, cleaning data. So in my background working for the agency, one of my jobs was to help operators recruit sources. And a lot of people don't think that that's similar to marketing or sales, the sales world, but it actually really is, because I was the analyst or the marketer actually going out through the databases, cleaning the data, and actually providing the information to our operator, which is kind of like a salesperson, recruiting that person to give information to the United States. So when I look at data, I actually look at this opportunity for businesses to clean their infrastructure and to actually have those processes in place and guide them in making intelligent decisions with the data that they're actually bringing into the organization by using some of those methodologies from some of these information collection platforms or agencies that are doing that. So they really have this opportunity to kind of leverage the data that they're bringing in to provide that insight to leadership.
Well, it's interesting. We have all been on that side, right? Where you open up an email or you get a phone call and you're like, they don't even know me, because they say something that I already have a car that I just purchased. I'm not going to, why are you sending me this information? Dan, that's when all of a sudden the marketing fail hits, right? The technology is working, but not quite so much.
Yeah, oftentimes. Just to piggyback off that, Angela and Jennifer's comment and what you just said, Lynn, I mean, oftentimes people don't realize that data has a context to it. There's a hierarchy to it. That data was collected, as Jennifer mentioned, as part of a process, and whether that was a sales and marketing process, whether it was a customer service or support process, and understanding the context in which we gathered that information helps when you determine your outreach and your connection with those customers. And today it's about the experience. It's not just about, hey, how many contacts or email addresses can we send an email to? It's the context of how we gathered this information and what content are those individuals, assuming we're marketing to individuals, what context do they want to be marketed to? Otherwise you get the unsubscribes.
So everybody gets into the pandemic remote. It is told we are shutting down. We have all of this data at our fingertips. And then all of a sudden you're also realizing, I don't have enough technology. I don't have what I need. Scott, have you seen that there were quick decisions made that potentially could be downfalls for businesses? How can they pick themselves up? And when do you really know this technology is right for my business, my customer, my member?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think in a scenario that we were in, there's the potential for fraud. There's potential for identity theft, business risk. Businesses are at risk because of computers that are going out into homes that might not be hardened down to prevent attacks. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of things that hopefully companies can get through this and not have any serious problems, but I think there's opportunities for them to take a serious look at how they conduct their technology plan going forward. We actually were fortunate it was part of a strategic plan to have a mobility strategy for our company. And when you can sit down and you can plan it out, as opposed to a pandemic, You're going to take a strong look at not only your budget, but all the things you need to have in order for your folks to be mobile. And why do you want to do that? And for us, it wasn't, business continuity is always part of anything, but it was more about growing the business and creating an environment of collaboration and more efficient workforce. And we realized, I just think it's a statistic that's so important for you to realize, we have grown about 18% annually for 30 years. And with that, our employee count, especially in our back office, had always been growing at a significant pace too, not necessarily 18%. After our mobility strategy, and we had everybody on laptops in our back office environment, 1 year later, our employee count stayed flat for the first time in my 26 years at the credit union. I attributed that to us collaborating and working together. So what are your outcomes you want to get from that? Business continuity is one of them, and that was a blessing for us, having done it before the pandemic. But don't just look at just that as the only reason why you want to do it. What are the business outcomes you want to get from it as well?
Angela, you had mentioned cloud working, and Scott just talked about, everybody heading out with very safe, protected, remote capabilities. There's still that fear factor that people have when you hear the word cloud. And how do you overcome that, and how do you help employees overcome that?
Yeah, one of the things that we do to help protect them is to really understand the infrastructure and the data that they're holding. So first, I think helping clients build a culture of security. So working with them to understand that there is a need to protect or to have certain data that needs to be private. So having all of the right policies in place to make sure that they're protecting the various types of data, or they have the mechanisms in place to protect the mobile devices or the mobile strategy that they have. But the biggest threat and risk that we've seen with disasters such as this, the pandemic, and any other natural disaster or other disaster that happens to an organization is that you'll see various outsider threats or hackers that try to exploit the situation, and they'll do that through social engineering attempts, which that's when they try to gather information in order to provide, get into the network and exploit the system, especially if the system, hasn't been hardened. So to have your employee base to be conscious that these types of attacks are happening, and make sure that the systems aren't, susceptible to being infiltrated. And I know there's been instances where there's been photo bombing or someone in a chat room that shouldn't be there because the security wasn't in place. So just really identifying the systems that do have the security protocols and controls in place to make sure you're protected.
Well, it's interesting, we're on GoToMeeting right now, and we've heard the horror stories of when Zoom first started, and everybody started using Zoom, and then horrid things would happen when someone was giving a dissertation. You're like, oh, this is my life's work, and I have some strange person doing really bad things here. When you look at that, and you're helping set your organization up for whatever type of webinar service, what are the things you should be thinking about, Dan, especially when it comes to security?
Yeah, and really, so the names you hear out there all the time from a video standpoint are Zoom, Microsoft, and we know that Zoom initially, right, had some vulnerabilities, as was just mentioned. And I think really, technology as a whole, the fact that a lot of organizations that ran out and had to do things, just to keep their business moving forward, but people really do need to take a look and understand that there's consumer grade technology, there's business grade technologies, and not everything is created equal. And then on top of that, which I think Angela touched on, is ensuring that your employees know how to use the technology, know the right times to use the technology. Now we're hearing terms like Zoom fatigue and people in video meetings all the time, frequently. But even just the securities of, did you close your meeting down? Did you end your meeting? did you leave it up and running, right? It's kind of like there was a commercial at one point where people were on a conference call and they said the mute button's broke. I can't remember the context of it, but are you sharing your video? You see these stories going out where somebody went to the restroom and forgot to shut the video off on their mobile phone. The ease of technology is phenomenal, and we live in a great day and age, but there's a lot of vulnerability and just overall risk that come with that, whether it's video solutions or any other technology.
Jennifer, how are you recommending that, is there training involved? What do you think that we should be doing, especially if we're not going to be all face-to-face? And to be honest with you right now, with masks, face-to-face can be very difficult.
Yeah, and we're trying to remain really platform agnostic on this one, because each company should pick one or two and then roll it out and make sure it's secure and train their people on how to use it. We've been joking that we need some international almost sign language for, hey, you're on mute and it looks like this. You're talking and you're on mute. Because it happens so many times. So it's almost like a new, a whole new way of communicating is happening. But some of these platforms, Lynn, have some really cool features that not everyone knows about, and I think they're continuing to improve based on what you said. Face-to-face is going to be difficult for a while. One of my favorites that a lot of people don't know about or use is the ability to go into breakout rooms. We use that function on Zoom. So if you're having a large, we've got a 50-person community planning session coming up, and we're going to have people go into preset breakout rooms where a moderator joins them, helps them do their work, summarizes it, and then you bring it back into the larger the larger group. These are going to get better and better. So I would ask that people pay attention, because they are continuing to improve ways to make that connection, even when we can't be together physically.
We right now are getting close to being able to wrap up with questions, but we also want you to ask questions. So there is a question button on our GoToMeeting, and if you have any questions, we would love to have you ask those. I know Angela has to leave a few minutes early, so we're going to, if you have any for Angela, you can ask those now, and Dan will help us moderate those. All of these things we have talked about, the new technologies, purchasing computers, purchasing the licenses for the computers, it sounds daunting in the sense of budget. And how are companies supposed to afford being able to invest in that when right now some companies are looking at their budgets and those are thrown out the window? Jennifer?
Oh, it's my favorite thing to say, that marketing is a value add and not overhead. So when we talk about marketing budgets, we have to also talk about marketing accountability. And again, it all loops together, Lynn, with the technology that's supporting marketing right now. You should be able to prove return on marketing investment. So we try to hold to at least a 3-to-1 ratio for return on marketing spend. That being said, you have to bring those expenses into one or another section of the budget. I think marketing has been sort of getting away with having their technology put under IT's budget, looking at Scott right now. And so marketing has a lower overall cost, correct? When in reality, a lot of these platforms do belong under the marketing budget. And I think that you need to bring it all together to have that transparency that the marketing spend is X and the marketing return is Y equals success. We did it. We proved return on marketing.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, in our organization with IT and ops, we talked about what platform do you choose, and the transparency of saying this is the platform, this is why. Scott, is there a fear about that budget, especially right now during the pandemic, when some people just don't know what their year end even looks like?
Yeah, just don't make these decisions in those silos of just technology and just marketing. I think everybody's got to come together and understand what the business case is, so that as a company, you're strategically setting your budget goals. This this may be the opportune time for companies to invest in that a little bit more if it makes sense. But I think if you have a technology person that solely has a technology budget but doesn't understand the business cases of what marketing can do to grow revenue, it's difficult to, in this period of time, to say we're going to allocate a lot of money to something that would benefit the entire company. So break down those silos, get to the table and collaborate, get on a Zoom meeting and collaborate to understand what you need to do together, for sure.
Yeah, and to piggyback off Scott's comment, I mean, we go into organizations every day, and it really, I can't emphasize enough. It's so many organizations work in silos, and they, the CFO says, I need a new accounting platform. And they say to the CFO, okay, well, go figure out what you want for an accounting platform. And then you've got the VP of sales that says, I need a CRM. And they say, oh, well, you go figure out what you need for a CRM. And then operations or somebody in customer service, I need a customer service solution. These decisions have to be part of a roadmap. It goes to, understanding your processes. What happens is all you're doing is accumulating technical debt. If we don't understand how this piece of technology, there's a ton of great CRMs out there. There's a ton of great finance and accounting platforms out there. It's usually less about the technology. You can find phenomenal platforms, but more about understanding how are these going to be a cog in the wheel? How are these going to help automate our processes? And that is the approach. So many people want fast within an organization. Well, I'm just going to go out, I'm going to select it because the salesperson I'm working with, I love them. I always say, it's just not sexy to talk about process. Nobody likes that. It's not fun. It's not fun to sit in meetings and have whiteboard sessions about how our technology is going to communicate and bring our processes together. But yet you've got to start there. Otherwise, it's that 2, 3, 4 year mark. Everybody's scratching their head, going, "What did we do?" And then to undo that, it's another 3, 4, 5+ year project, depending on the size of your organization.
Jennifer, I saw you kind of shake your head at fun. I know that that can be fun.
I love process. What's Dan talking about? Process is exciting.
Before we wrap up, I do have a question for each one of you. We'll start with Angela. What do you think are 2 things that a company can do right now that will help their journey? And I know we are in a different phase, but that different phase can last quite some time. So Angela, what do you think 2 things that a company can do right now to help them start with a technology roadmap or something else?
Well, actually, to piggyback on what Scott and Dan were talking about, one of the things that we recommend to do is to actually study the whole organization. So have someone come in and do an analysis or a gap analysis of your organization. We personally do something called a recon study or an assessment, where we actually study the culture of the organization, the ethnography, how they share information, because we do find that they are siloing the data, that they don't know how to collaborate with each other, that they haven't picked a solution that meets the business needs of every department versus one individual department. When I got out of the intelligence industry, one of the major things that I noticed is that a lot of businesses are driven by money versus the need to protect life. And so we were able to collaborate better in the intelligence industry because we had that overall mission. So I think helping organizations also make sure that their mission or their vision is clear to the rest of the organization, and helping those departments know that their part of their mission plays up to the greater mission. For me, that is huge as far as how to helping the organization share information and partnering with building that, having that either that analysis or the assessment that can really tell you what your digital landscape is like, and then how your organization, are they siloed? Do they not share information? That can really help build that technology roadmap and provide the tools to provide the right selection of technology.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I would say first, I'm a big believer in creating a committee. There's zero cost in doing that. So back to my earlier comment about, CFO, VP of sales, make sure that you've got kind of each functional area of your company represented. in adding input to the table or bringing input to the table. And then really secondly, you don't need super elaborate tools to begin process mapping. If you want, you can use some large sheets of printer paper, whatever it is. But start really that process, or bring somebody in, because anybody that's coming in to implement technology, if they're not starting with a process first approach, this might be a little controversial, but I would challenge that they're the right organization. So regardless of what you're mapping your processes out on, they might not be perfect, but at least start to get your processes on paper and documented. So then when you start to look at technology, you can work with your vendors to say, here's what we have. Now those things might need to be enhanced, probably will need to be enhanced, but it at least gives you a good baseline to start from. So formulate a committee and start to get your processes on paper.
Scott, what are your thoughts?
Well, for me, I'm concerned about the back to work strategy. So I think about that a lot, and we like I would say most businesses in the U.S. have the majority of their employees are Monday through Friday or during their work week are always on premise. There are companies obviously that are all over the place, but I would still say that most companies in the U.S. that's probably a true case. The new normal that Dan mentioned earlier, nobody really knows what that's going to be like, but I do believe we're going to have, even our company now will have a mix of people who are coming back to work and or working remote. And what that looks like, we're strategically trying to get our arms around what technology we need to do to support it. So for example, think about a conference room now that might have 4 people in it on a webinar, and then 4 people who are individually remote. And there's so many companies that can't support that today, and we're even one of those. We'd all have to be on individual computers to pull that off. So think about your small conference rooms that might support the in-office group with a few ancillary people working remote. But how do we also get people back in the office and collaborating on a regular basis? So if they do still work remote, maybe is it 1 day a week, 2 days a week? Is there rotations? And it will maybe provide opportunities so that here's an outcome that could happen from that. Companies that are growing can maybe take the facility that they have and add longevity to it when they think about space needs, because now you don't have 100% of your workforce 100% of the time in a building. You could create rotations around that and extend the longevity of how you sit in those spaces. People aren't owning a desk anymore. It's with their plants and pictures on it. They're sharing that and rotating between in the office and working from home at the same time. And still being collaborative and efficient, I think that's a challenge. So I'm concerned about this back to work strategy for sure.
Jennifer?
Gosh, I was really thinking about what Dan was saying about the process. I keep going back to that. I can't help myself. But there's this slide that we use often. It's called the Martech 5000, and it's just logo soup. It's 5,000 logos, Lynn, of marketing technology solutions that are available, and that's from 2018. So it's probably the Martech 10,000 now. And choosing technology is not going to solve the full problem. It might give you a little pain relief for a day or two, but you have to start with the basics, which is documenting, auditing that customer journey. What do you want it to be, and where are you trying to go before you ever start doing software, demos and things like that. It has to be about the customer journey first.
So Angela, I know you're going to have to step away in a few minutes. Do you have anything extra that you'd like to say? And then I have a pointed question for Dan because of an app that he talked about earlier. So start thinking about that, Dan. Angela, any thoughts?
No, I mean, this was all really helpful, and I learned a lot even just from the peers and the panelists here. So I think that we hit a lot of good points.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We are not wrapping up yet, but Angela has to step out, and we will be, as we said, have a recording of this. If you have specific questions for Angela, we will have her contact information as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Lynn.
Now, Dan, way at the beginning, when we first started talking about webinars, you had mentioned to me about a company that you had been working with right at the start of the pandemic that had an issue that had to be solved. What was that?
Yeah, so basically this was an organization that obviously everybody needed to social distance. So the use case was, where we had vendors coming in the past who are authorized vendors to be on site. We don't want that human interaction. These vendors still need to come on site. They need to do their deliveries. They need to do their inspections, all of those types of things. So what they needed to do, or what they wanted to do, is create the ability for the vendors to kind of come into a lobby area and use a device to both log in, sign a waiver, but also create a record that the individual was there. So temperature, all of those types of things, to be able to notify the rest of the organization if somebody came in and then they found out they had COVID or a temperature or something like that down the road. So we deployed an app, and thankfully this was an existing customer, so they had very organized data, very organized information already, but we were able to create an app on a tablet device within a matter of really a couple days, where the vendor can come into the lobby, walk up to a tablet, fill out their name, what they're there for. The tablet takes a picture of them, stores a record of the picture, a waiver pops up, they sign the waiver, notifies staff on site that that vendor is there on site. So to be able to do those things, just kind of coming full circle back to really this conversation, having understanding your processes, understanding what you want to do. Many of those things may be manual today for different organizations, but to know what those things are and to have systems in place kind of ready at the avail. Technology doesn't have to be a big forklift or a big investment. Innovation, frankly, a lot of people tend to tie innovation directly to technology. Really, innovation starts with your business. It starts with your products, and really doesn't necessarily have anything to do with technology. You might want to leverage technology to enhance those things and help innovate your company more. But I guess to tie that off and just come full circle, I really think organizations just need to get started. Just start to move the ball forward, start to move the needle. It doesn't have to be a big forklift or a big investment out of the gates.
Scott, any final questions or thoughts?
No, like Angela said, I've learned a lot just listening to the peers on the call, and I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
Jen, we started with you. We're going to end with you. Save the best for last.
Oh boy, no pressure at all. I keep going back to the statistic that I've used. It's from 2018, and it's related to B2B, and it says 70% of the buyer's journey is complete before a buyer ever reaches out to sales. That was in 2018. That was pre-COVID. So I wonder what the percentage is now. And if you think that through, how much more do you need to put out about your organization and about the value, the consistency that you need to have? Because I am going to assume that more of the buyer's journey is online, and that companies need to be there and they need to be well positioned and ready to handle that. I would love to see an update to that statistic right now.
Well, we're going to have to dig into that, see if we can find it, Jennifer. I will tell you this, you guys, everybody in the last few weeks as we've done our webinars, the one thing that we've always come back to is the sharing of information. And you will receive this webinar as a link that you can share. And each one of the organizations that have been featured over the last 3 weeks have absolute phenomenal website information that you can go to. I know consumers, we have a back to work focus that connects you to the questions that your business may have, not only around technology, but even if you are a PPP business, or if you're looking at what is your roadmap you want to create. So please feel free to reach out to any of our panelists. We cannot thank you enough for the last 3 weeks. We're going to continue doing webinars as we move forward on topics that are important to you. So if you have any that you would like to share with us, please do so. And in the meantime, everybody stay safe, stay home if you're working remote, and know that, hey, everybody does also want to see your face too. So it's a time to start reaching back out and getting back to work. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.